They also can't really make that many personnel moves, so you can make Budenholzer think he has a voice in the process. You're like, hey, you want to pick this minimum guy, or do you want this minimum guy?
We should probably move to now the discussion of Phoenix. It would appear that their evaluation of Frank Vogel was more an evaluation of who they could get to potentially replace Frank Vogel, because the news is that Mike Budenholzer, who has a lot of connections to Arizona, is moving towards a deal with Phoenix. And after Vogel's firing after one season, and again, I don't think Vogel did a particularly poor job. Assuming this Budenholzer thing happens, generally when the reporting gets to this level, Ishbia is probably not going to cheap out on the coach, I'm guessing. So it feels like they're going to head there. Now, one thing that could be interesting is that Bud, I think it's probably accurate to say that in both of his previous stops, he has had some input on personnel at varying times, and that's probably something that he has wanted. There isn't really a particularly solid power structure, it would seem, with James Jones having predated the Ishbia era.
They also can't really make that many personnel moves, so you can make Budenholzer think he has a voice in the process. You're like, hey, you want to pick this minimum guy, or do you want this minimum guy?
So maybe that could be a little bit of this discussion too, but I expect this deal to get done. I think we're at the point where it's worth analyzing it. So what do you think?
Well, and Nate, the other part of that is that Budenholzer being reported as a possibility means that the basic bars have been met. Because if they hadn't, then it just wouldn't be talked about.
Well, it said they're moving towards a deal too.
Yeah,
that's a pretty.
Yeah. So I've Mike Budenholzer has specific problems as a playoff adjuster. That has been the most frequent criticism. I agree with those criticisms. I've talked about it a fair amount. However, something Mike Budenholzer has done well, both with the Hawks and with the Bucks, meaningfully different personnel in those places, is understanding what his team does and does not have and building schemes and concepts that work within that. And the math problem was a big story in Milwaukee. It was a different calculus in Atlanta, both of which were intensely successful. And so I believe that Mike Budenholzer, when the groceries are weird, I think that he will do a good job cooking a good meal. And considering Phoenix's groceries aren't getting any better, they aren't getting any different, they aren't getting any more normal, I think that Budenholzer is a good fit.
The two lowest hanging fruit things to me for Phoenix, maybe I would say there's probably three, and they're all in the offensive end. Not taking enough threes, poor spacing, and not enough ball movement. And Mike Budenholzer teams usually do a pretty darn good job with that. And I think his Bucks team just never had great offensive personnel. They didn't look amazing in the playoffs, but they always took a ton of threes. They ran. They made sure that the floor was spaced. And he was one of the guys who got publicity for putting those boxes on the floor. You make sure you run here every single time. And I think that those things are all things that he could help out with. And I also think that he will, whatever a team's kind of defensive floor is, he will help you reach that. Like I don't see how they get much better than Vogel. I thought Vogel.
You mean raise that floor, or because reaching the floor, or am I mishearing you?
Or anyway. Sorry, defensive ceiling. Whatever a defensive ceiling is, in like a regular season sort of context, I think he would reach it. But you say that his weaknesses are adjustments, and sometimes guys do learn new tricks after getting fired in that regard. But I think if that's his weakness, they don't really have any pieces to make adjustments with anyway. It's kind of the guys are the guys there. And so I think he can try to find ways that, like, for example, if he can just get this offense up to being like a really good offense who runs, and then go back to find some, like Mike Budenholzer will take away something from you. He may give you something else, but he will take away something. And as long as you can have that type of a defense with this team and kill it on the offensive end of the available coaches, I like that. He always believes in Atlanta, he shot a lot of threes in Phoenix. And he also is just going to hold guys accountable. And he's just going to make sure that you don't make a bunch of stupid mistakes, which quite frankly, the Suns also did a ton of this season. So I think he's a much better fit than, say, he might have been in LA, where there was, they just dealt with one of his disciples there anyway in Darvin Ham, and that probably wouldn't have been too popular. So I think he's the best hire available, and I think he can be an upgrade on Vogel. I think it's reasonable to think he could do. You never know, but he could do a better job than Vogel. And if that's truly the exchange, I actually do endorse it. Not that I would think that Frank Vogel did a bad job necessarily.
And I definitely would prefer Mike Budenholzer to Chauncey Billups, as there was maybe some of the Suns players are interested in Billups. I have seen nothing from Billups' tenure in Portland to make me think that he is a value add coach. So, hey, if the players, I don't know who pushed for Vogel, who didn't, but Budenholzer, I think it's the right choice.